Hi everyone, welcome to this video where we will learn how to detect fraud using Amazon Fraud Detector. So before we begin with the video, let me give a little introduction about myself. My name is Aishwarya Sood. I am working as a software engineer and AWS trainer, and I am 3x AWS certified cloud practitioner, solutions architect associate and developer associate. Also, I am an AWS Academy accredited educator. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. My profile name is Aishwarya Sood29, and you can also scan the QR code to quickly view my profile. So in today's video, you will learn about Amazon Fraud Detector, its features and few use cases. I'll also tell you how it uses machine learning to improve fraud detection, and then I will show you how you can set up Amazon Fraud Detector from scratch and use it to detect various fraudulent activities. So let's begin with the session. Before we learn what is Amazon Fraud Detector, let me tell you what exactly is fraud detection first. So fraud detection is a process or a set of activities, you can say, that are undertaken to prevent money, data or any kind of property from being obtained through any false pretenses. Fraud detection can be applied to many industries, and the most common applications of fraud detection include account related fraud and payment and transaction fraud. Account fraud is further divided into new account fraud and account takeover fraud. In new account fraud, new accounts are created by using fake identities, and account theft fraud occur when a hacker obtains the products and services by using another person's existing account. And payment fraud is any kind of false or any kind of illegal transaction that is carried out by a cyber criminal. And these were just few of the examples of fraud detection, and in today's session we are gonna learn how to detect these kind of frauds. For that to be accomplished on AWS, we have a wonderful service, that is Amazon Fraud Detector. So Amazon Fraud Detector, it's a fully managed service that makes it very easy to identify potentially fraudulent online activities such as online payment fraud and the creation of fake accounts being the very common examples. And how does it do that? It uses your data, machine learning, and more than 20 years of expertise from Amazon to automatically identify potentially fraudulent online activity so that you can catch more fraud faster. It enables you to build fraud detection models, and you do not need any kind of ML, that is machine learning experience, to use Amazon Fraud Detector. Just simply upload your data to train, test and deploy a fraud detection model. And deploy models are imported to the detectors, where you can configure the decision logic like some kind of rules to interpret the model's score and assign outcomes such as pass or send the transactions to a human investigator for review. So the terms that I just spoke, the score and the decision logic, the outcomes, these are the things that we are gonna learn in the upcoming slides. And during this whole process, a series of models that have learned patterns of fraud from AWS and Amazon's own fraud expertise is used to boost your model's performance. So let's move further and discuss a few concepts, because to understand how Amazon Fraud Detector works, first we need to understand the terminologies, so that like the ones that we'll encounter while setting up the fraud detector on Amazon Fraud Detector. So let's understand the terminologies first. First terminology or the concept that you would say is the event. So what's an event? It's a business activity that is evaluated for fraud risk. With fraud detector, you generate fraud predictions for the events. And next is the event type. So what's an event type? It defines the structure of an event to which is to be sent to Amazon Fraud Detector, and this includes the variables that are sent as a part of the event, the entity performing the event such as a customer, and the labels that classify the event. Example event types include like online payment transactions, account registrations and authentication. Next is the entity. Who is performing the event? It represents who is performing the event, and as a part of the fraud detection you can pass the entity ID to indicate the specific entity that performed the event. And next is the entity type. So an entity type classifies the entity. Examples can include a customer or a merchant or an account. Next comes a label. So what's a label? It classifies an event as either fraudulent or legitimate, and labels are used to train supervised machine learning models in Amazon Fraud Detector. Then comes a variable. It represents a data element that is associated with an event that you want to use in the fraud prediction. And variables can either be sent with an event as a part of fraud prediction or derived, such as the output of the fraud detector model, or you can also get that from the SageMaker model. So apart from this, there are a few more concepts that we need to discuss, but these are just the few lines that I am telling you about these concepts. More of it we are gonna learn that while we see the working of Amazon Fraud Detector. So you will understand that better when we see the working. Next is the model type. So the model type defines the algorithms, enrichments, and the feature transformations used during the model training, as well as the data requirements to train the model. Then the model training and model versions. It's the process, the model training is the process of using a provided data set to create a model that can predict fraudulent events. And all steps in the model training process are fully automated, including data validation, data transformation, feature engineering, algorithm selection, training, and model optimization. And in Amazon Fraud Detector, the output from a training is called a model version. Next is a model deployment. So when you deploy a model, you make a trained model version available for real-time fraud predictions. Just like after testing, after you have built the model and you tested that this is working fine as per your requirements, you can then deploy it so that you can use it for the real-time predictions. Only deployed model versions can be imported to the detectors. But what's a detector? A detector contains the detection logic, such as the models and the rules for a particular event that you want to evaluate for the fraud. And a detector can have multiple versions, with each version having a status of draft, active, or inactive. Only one detector version can be in the active status at a time. And next comes a rule. It's nothing but a condition that tells Amazon Fraud Detector how to interpret the variable values during a fraud prediction. It consists of one or more variables, a logic expression, and one or more outcomes. And the variables used in the variables that are used in the rule, they must be a part of the event that is being evaluated by the detector. And a detector must have at least one associated rule. Next is the outcome. It is a result, or you can say an output from a fraud prediction. Each rule used in a fraud prediction must specify one or more outcomes. And then comes a prediction. After you create a detector, you can generate fraud predictions by calling the API, that is get event prediction, with your event variables and specifying which detector you want to use. And the API always returns an outcome. If the model is used in the detector, Amazon Fraud Detector also returns a corresponding fraud prediction score. So we will see all those things in the working on the AWS console in just next few minutes. Till then, let's see a little bit about the working of Amazon Fraud Detector. So let's have a quick look at the working of fraud detector. So first of all, to generate the fraud predictions, fraud detector uses machine learning models that are trained with your past fraud data, and each model is trained using a model type, which is a specialized recipe to build a fraud detection model for a specific fraud use case. And then the deployed models are imported to detectors, where you can configure the decision logic to interpret the model's score. And then model's output is a prediction in the form of a score ranging from 0 to 1000 that predicts the likelihood of a fraud risk. And at the final stage of the process, you set up the decision logic to interpret your model score and assign outcomes such as pass, or send the transaction to a human investigator for some review. And you can use the AWS console to create and manage models and detector version. And also there's an option to use AWS CLI or the SDKs for Amazon fraud detector to build all this. So here, as you can see in the image, the CSV data file, the historical data was uploaded to the fraud detector. Just a quick review of the working. Then we build the fraud detection machine learning model that is customized to data in a few clicks using a fully automated process that includes loading, inspecting the data, features identification, algorithm selection, training and optimizing ML models, and performance validation and hosting models. Then the detector will be created with the decision rules to return the model score. And then for the real time fraud prediction, for the real time fraud detection, you can say call the Amazon fraud detector API that I told you. So this was about working. Now let's look into a little more into the working, and we will detect fraud using Amazon fraud detector. But before we jump on to AWS console, let me give you a little idea about the workflow that will be followed there. The steps for creating a model, building a detector, and getting fraud predictions include: first, we will define the event that we want to evaluate for the fraud. Then gather some historical data or some data set. Okay, we can use some sample data set for the demo, or maybe if you are using it so for your use case, you can use your data set. And then create a model version, which is a trained model using a model type. And then create a detector that will include the model version and the decision rules. Okay, and then we'll send the events to the fraud detector to get a fraud prediction, and we will be able to see how is it performing based on the data set and all the rules that we have specified. So before we begin with the demo of the fraud detector, we need some data for the training. So this data will have input features, but let me show you the data that I have. I have got this from the documentation itself. So this is just a sample data set. This data has input features which will be defined by variables, and output labels which will be defined by labels in the fraud detector. And additionally, you will define the events based on the type of entities that are sending the data for the prediction. So you can see IP address and email address will be there, and label has been given to all the data entries that are there, either it is legitimate or is it fraud, so that we will see what's the purpose of all of this while we do the demo on AWS. So let's go to the AWS console and start with the demo. For the very first step, what we have to do, we have to upload some data to S3. Okay, the data set that I just show you, we have to upload that in S3. So what we will do, we will go to S3 and create a bucket and upload this data to that bucket. Okay, so let me create a bucket. So one more important thing, for the bucket to be created, the region that you need to select, you have to select a region in one of the regions in which fraud detector is available. It's currently not available in all the regions, but yes, Singapore, yes, it is available there. So I'll leave it as Singapore, and name I will give as FD demo 123. Let me see if that's available. Region, I'll keep it as Singapore, because fraud detector, yes, it's available there. And I'll just remove the public access as of now, and other settings, leave it as default, and create a bucket. So okay, FD demo 123 has been created. Let me upload my data there. So the same data set that I showed you, we will upload that data. Okay, so I mistakenly uploaded the zip. This one I do not need to upload. I have to upload a different one. Let me see. Yes, this one I have, and I will upload this one, and this I will just remove. Okay, and this also I will keep it as public, and then upload. So the object has been uploaded. Now what I will do, I will copy the path of this object because I will need it later once I move to the fraud detector. So let's copy the path of this and go to the fraud detector now. So first we will create an event for this. So click on this events and click on create. Name this as let's say registration data sample or registration sample 1, and description you can add optionally. Entity, we will create a new one, and let's say we are creating sample customer, and description we can leave it as default, we do not want to add it, and then click on create entity. Next, for the event variables, you have to select variables from the training data set. So it will be taken from the data set that we have uploaded. And for the IAM role, I will select to create a new IAM role. And here I have to paste the bucket name. So the bucket name that I created was FD demo 123. Was it hyphens or the underscores? Let me see. Yeah, it was hyphens, and click on create role. Now the role has been created. This role will be used later, and this data location, the path of the object that we have uploaded in S3 bucket, and click on upload. So now the data has been uploaded. Here we have to select the variables. So since I select variables from a training data set, that's why I am able to see this here. IP address, I will select IP address, and for the email address, select this and go ahead. And for the labels, we will create new labels, one as a fraud and create label. Next also we will create a new label. So next event, legit will be there, and fraud refers to the data that is that corresponds to the values that represent the fraud activities in the data set that we have provided, and legit represents to the data that that is legitimate in the data set that we have provided. Then click on create event type. So the event type has been created, and here we will just close it. So the next step, as if you remember, next step will be to create a model. So here click on models, and here I will add a model, create a model. I can also import it from Amazon SageMaker, but here I will add a model. So I will give it the name of my FD model, and description you can add optionally. I am leaving it as default. Model type I am selecting as a online fraud insights, and event type just the one that we have created just now, that was registration sample 1. So this one I have to select. And IAM role, if you remember, it was a data access role. The number I have forgotten. Let me check that in the event details. Then I will select it. So the role that was created during the model was this 121. This was a role that I created during that time, and data location I have to enter the path of the file, and then click on next. So here variables are selected, and I want both of them. Fraud labels, I have to select first fraud, and then also for the legitimate labels I have to select legit. We have created the name as fraud because this was the event label in the data set that I have. As you can see, legit and fraud labels are there. If you have some other word, you will have to create the label with that name, and here also it will appear accordingly. Then click on next and review everything, then click on create and train model. So now the model training has begun, and this process is quite a long process and it takes almost 45 to 50 minutes to finish. Okay, so I will pause the video here, and once it is ready to deploy, we will begin the further process. So my model is now ready to deploy. It took almost an hour to deploy here, and now I just need to click on version and I can see more details about the model version that is deployed. So here I can see the performance. This is a model performance section, and here we can explore the various metrics that are generated by the training, and including the score distribution and also the confusion metrics. This data will be useful in defining the appropriate thresholds for predicting the for prediction using the detector, and we can see more here like how much importance each variable will be having. Like the IP address will be having much importance than the email address in our case. And you can also explore more by clicking on the tables tab. You can look at more data that is available, and also the guidance is given like how to interpret this performance data. Okay, so for this demo what I will do, I will keep the upper threshold of 900 and lower threshold of 700. So what does that mean? We will see that in some time. So before going to any further step, before going to the detector step, what we will do, we will deploy this model version. So for that we have to click on actions and then deploy model version, and then click on deploy version. So let's see if it has, yeah, it has come to the deploying state. This also is going to take some time, maybe some 10 to 15 minutes. Let's wait till then, and then we will go ahead and create the detector for our model. So until it deploys, till then we can do one more thing. Before creating the detector, we will have to create the outcomes. Okay, so once it is like completely deployed, we will be finished with the model training and the deployment, and then we will create the fraud detector. Okay, so we will create the fraud detector by defining the outcomes with the fraud detection model, and then rules using the thresholds that we have just noticed, like 900 for the upper one and 700 for the lower one. And after we create the fraud detector, the final step, we will be testing the outcomes with that, and with some sample data that we have in our data set, and then we will be good to go to publish the final detector. So here first step, being the first step, will be to create the outcome. So go on to outcomes, click on create. So for this detector, what we will do, we will create 3 outcomes. One is high risk, then medium risk, and then low risk. High risk will indicate that the outcome that it has given, it is for fraudulent, and medium risk will indicate that the outcome that it has given, it requires some manual review, and low risk will indicate that the outcome is legitimate. So let's create the outcome. First I will create high risk, and same way we will create another outcomes as well. So one has been created here, and now I will go back to the outcomes and create 2 more for the medium risk as well as for the low risk. So high risk and medium risk is ready in my outcomes. I can see both of them are there. Now the last one, low risk, I will create and then click on save outcome. So all the 3 outcomes I have created here. Next step will be to create a detector, but in that we will be adding the model also. So let's wait for the model version to be deployed, and then only we will add it to the detector. So now the status of the model deployment has been changed to active after waiting for like 10 to 15 minutes. And now I will go ahead and create a detector for the same. So let's go and create a detector. Click on create detector. Here I will give a name to my detector. Let me give it as sample detector. and description is optional, so I'm leaving. Then event type, which one I created, registration underscore sample one, which this was the one that I created in the beginning. Then click on next, and I will add a model. So click here and select the model that we have created. Version, we have deployed first version, and then click on add model, and then again click on next. So here we have to define some rules. Okay, we will be adding 3 rules for various conditions, and we will be good to go for the further steps then. So here let me create the first rule, which I will name as auto fraud rule, which indicates that it is exactly a fraudulent activity. And second, we will create the review rule, which includes that okay, some manual review is required. And the last one, we will create the auto legit rule, that okay, this is fine, this is legitimate. And so for this we can add a description, like what this rule does, like it will detect the fraudulent activities, and we can add that here. And for the expression, we have to add an expression, model name underscore inside score, just type dollar and you will be able to see that. And for the first one, we will specify if it is greater than or equal to 900. So if the model score comes out to be greater than or equal to 900, what will be the outcome? It will be high risk, okay, that it is fraudulent. Okay, so let me give a description for this rule. Detects the fraud, and only detects the fraud, and then yeah, everything else is fine. So click on add rule here. So the rule has been added. Now I will add another rule, as I mentioned earlier. So rule, I will click on this create rule, and again name it as what was the name? It was a review rule, because we have created the fraud one. So review rule, and detects the frauds, and manual review, indicates manual review will be required. Okay, and for the expression, again just type dollar and my model, whatever model you have created, model name will be there, and underscore inside score. So if something is greater than 700, okay, so greater than 700 and less than 900, I can add. Okay, so if something is less than 900 and greater than 700, let me check the syntax, and here also I will have to add the score. So yeah, this syntax is fine. If the score is less than 900 and it is greater than 700, okay, between 700 to 900, it will be of medium risk. Okay, that means it will be requiring some manual review. So click on add rule, and now 2 rules have been added. Next, click on add one more rule, create rule, and then name this rule as auto legit rule. So it indicates the entry is legit, and so for the expression here, I will add first dollar and this score if it is lesser than 700, lesser than or equal to 700 also, because for the first one, second one we added it as greater than 700. So for this we can keep as if the score is coming out to be less than or equal to 700, yes, this is of low risk. So the rule has been added, all the 3 rules have been added. Let's go to the further step now, because our rules have been added. Let's click on next. So here I can leave all the settings as default, and I can go for the next and review all the settings that you have made, and then click on create detector. So the detector has been created, and now I can publish the detector and use it for real-time predictions. But before publishing and using it for the real-time fraud predictions, I want to test it, and here I can add some data, and this will tell me what is the score. So email address and IP address, let me take the data from this, like the IP address, this one. IP address is the one that I copied here. I think that was not copied. Okay, so for the equivalent email address is this one, and adding this and click on run test. So the model score, you can see it is less than 700, it is 202. Okay, and it indicates low risk. Why? Because it is having a label of legit. Okay, so if we go a little down, and okay, this one is labeled as fraud. Let me try this one, this IP address and the equivalent email address, what it shows. This one IP address and also the equivalent email address is this one. So for this, if I run the test, okay, so you can see the score is 995. This shows high risk because it was marked as fraud in the data set. So based on the training that it has got of, because of the data set and all, it is giving us the results. So for the other values also, if I keep trying with all these values, it will show me legit. The score will be below 900 itself. Okay, but if I choose for some fraud entry, then it will show me some score greater than 900 because it is marked as fraud, and we will be able to see different results in the console. Because the model is not memorizing the data, but it is making predictions. But with prediction algorithms, many of the prediction algorithms, the result may not be 100% accurate. Okay, so we have seen the working of our fraud detection, fraud detector model and the detector. We are good to go, and we can publish it, and we can incorporate it in our applications, and we can use it for the real-time fraud predictions based on whatever use case is there. And for that, we will first have to publish this detector. For that, what you have to do, just click on actions and click on publish and click on the version that is there for your detector. For now, I am not gonna publish it, but for your application, this is a process for how you will be publishing it, the version 1. Okay, and you will be able to use it in your applications. So this is how we set up the entire fraud detection model, and also the detector, also the outcomes that we have created. We created event types, and we for that, like basically to start with this one, we will be requiring a data set. So make sure you have a data set before you start up with the fraud detector. Okay, for the demo purposes, it is fine to use a sample one, but of course for the real cases, if you have a data set, and you will be then good to go to start up with the fraud detector and detect the frauds with your applications. This was a process for how you can set up the fraud detector. So this is almost it. Let me get back to the slides now, and let's see what's left. Just a few use cases that I want to tell you. It is designed for online fraud use cases that require the real-time evaluation using the machine learning models and rules. So some of the use cases in that include the new account fraud within an account sign-up process and online identity fraud. Some of these example I gave you earlier also while describing what is fraud detection, and payment fraud for the online orders, then guest checkout fraud, also the loyalty account protection, and also seller fraud in online marketplaces. These are just some of the examples of the frauds that can happen, and you can detect these frauds. But apart from this also, these days many frauds are happening, and you can try fraud detector for many such frauds and see how that works. And I hope you have understood everything from this session, and we will meet in the next video. Thank you.